This is Tom Fox. I would like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series, Integrity Matters, Assessing the Corporate Compliance Climate in 2021, brought to you and sponsored by K2 Integrity. In this 5-part exploration, I'm joined by Snezana Gabauer, who is an Executive Managing Director and Head of Investigations and Risk Advisory Practice for the Americas. She advises leaders in business, finance, and government on risk management, investigations, and compliance, and is recognized for her significant experience in anti-corruption and investigative matters in Latin America, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, across every business sector. And Bob Brenner is the Global Co-Managing Partner and Chief Legal Officer at K2 Integrity. He has more than 25 years' experience in advising government and private sector clients as a monitor, investigator, and as consultant. Bob has been appointed and currently serves as a monitor or independent consultant on behalf of federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as international regulatory bodies. Bob and his team have also designed and implemented changes to clients' compliance procedures, risk assessment procedures and processes, training protocols, and technology to close loopholes and provide both robust monitoring of future transactions and conduct. Over this 5-part series, we will assess the landscape resulting from the pandemic regarding compliance. We will consider what companies can expect from the new administration and its priorities. We will consider anti-bribery and anti-corruption compliance and enforcement in 2021. We will look at global trends impacting risk and compliance in 2021. And we will conclude with preparing your company for what is next. In this episode 3, I'm joined by Snezana Gabauer, and we look at anti-bribery and anti-corruption investigations and enforcement in 2021 and beyond. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again for another episode, and today I'm joined by Snezana Gabauer, and we're going to take a look at anti-bribery and anti-corruption in 2021. Snezana, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
2020 was a record year in FCPA penalties, and we had the largest international anti-corruption fine ever in the form of the Airbus enforcement action. But cumulatively, enforcement actions were down from 2019. Is this just a one-year anomaly, the way things go at the end of an administration where many companies try to settle, or is something else going on, in your opinion?
Indeed, 2020 was a record year for FCPA penalties, right? I think a little over $6 billion, which was more than double the amount for the prior year, and which was a record year that far. So there's definitely an increasing trend, and it's remarkable because it is contrary to the predictions from 4 years ago, when many expected that the FCPA enforcement trend would dramatically decrease under the Trump administration. So the one thing, though, that is very different, and that it wasn't an upward trend, were the number of new FCPA investigations that were initiated under the Trump administration. So it is not clear whether the slowdown was an actual reflection of the president's personal skepticism of the FCPA, or it was a mere coincidence. Regardless, we expect that the Biden administration is going to continue the trend of increasing FCPA enforcement, settlement values, but also increase the pace of initiating new FCPA investigations. Go ahead.
Yes, we were focusing on the Department of Justice, but in a prior episode, you talked about the Securities and Exchange Commission. And one of the things that interested me, certainly last year, but over the past couple of years, is sort of not the independence of the SEC in bringing enforcement actions, because they have that statutory authority, but SEC actions which don't rise to the level of criminal conduct that the SEC seems to be aggressively approaching. Is that something you think we will continue to see from the SEC as opposed to perhaps from the Department of Justice?
I think with the change of the administration, we should expect that across the board, most of the leading regulators are going to take a very strong hand in continuing to enforce various corporate and financial fraud actions and investigations. If we look back at prior democratic administrations, I think, and if we look at administrations that have dealt with the aftermath of economic downturns, we will see a very distinct pattern and focus on the pursuit of corporate and financial fraud. So both from DOJ and SEC, I think we should expect a very increased focus on enforcement and initiation of new investigations.
Zana, I wanted to see if I could maybe change the focus to a little bit more international or global anti-corruption enforcement. Certainly, we saw some very large cases last year. We continue to see cooperation by prosecutors literally across the globe. Some of the enforcement actions had multiple payments to multiple regulators across the globe. And if we look at things like the French prosecutorial service had a major case, a major part of the Airbus case, the Serious Fraud Office is seeking to have greater clarity for its role, and other international or outside the U.S. national prosecution services seem more aggressive. What do you see as the outlook for global anti-corruption enforcement in 2021 and perhaps even beyond?
You're right, Tom, that over the last 5 or so years, there's been an unprecedented cooperation, international cooperation between law enforcement authorities on these complex cross-border corruption and fraud investigations. I think the U.S., as we said, had a record-breaking year and an increasing trend in that space, and they have worked very closely with the U.K., Switzerland, and Israel, for example, as well as Brazil and perhaps France on that collaboration and taking the lead on anti-corruption. One thing that struck me, and I think, and I wanted to mention, is the report that Transparency International recently published at the end of last year, where they did a survey and they found that more than half of the G20 countries are actually not actively investigating and sanctioning companies for paying bribes abroad. The report found that the biggest global exporters are with the worst track record with this respect are actually China, Japan, the Netherlands, South Korea, Hong Kong, Canada, India, and Mexico. And so it is. This is in contrast to the news we learned recently about South Korea taking an action against the leader of Samsung. But whether that's a pattern and that's indicating a new direction, or it's an isolated example, we're yet to see. However, it would be good for the global anti-corruption landscape, enforcement landscape, if we see a bit more action by these leading companies by these leading countries whose companies engage in export and in cross-border trade.
If you're sitting on the other side of the desk and you're in a corporation or perhaps even a major financial institution, and you see this trend of increasing cooperation amongst international prosecutorial services and even increased international enforcement, how do you advise organizations to take steps to address the threat of corruption literally across the globe?
Obviously, a robust compliance program and a robust risk management framework is a must nowadays. Transacting across borders is the norm for most companies, and it becomes ever more complex for companies that have operations across different countries. So, stress testing the existing compliance program, ensuring it is up to date for the ever evolving regulations in the different countries where you operate or where you trade or where you have presence is essential. Making making timely and regulatory and regular enhancements to that program is essential. Training is that we can't stress enough the importance of training, not only the frequency, but also ensuring that all of the employees, including senior management, including the compliance personnel, is trained and attuned to the evolving regulations, and then that training has to cascade down through the organization in a very systematic way. Lining up knowledgeable and experienced risk advisory, legal, and investigative personnel and resources is also essential. You have to be able to have a plan and act fast in case you're facing an issue and in case you need to mitigate an unanticipated risk. Anti-corruption is one of the key area of ensuring integrity for every organization, and setting the tone at the top, as I said, and cascading it throughout the organization is essential.
One of the most difficult conversations that I think an advisor such as yourself can have with a client is around the decision to self-disclose or not. And that has multiple ramifications. It's obviously an important consideration in the United States, but how can you help a client think through that on a truly international basis where they may have to disclose to multiple investigative bodies across the globe?
It's a very good question, and one that usually it's answered with a group of legal advisors who are very fluent, I think, with the not only with the regulation but with the precedents and have experience with regulators in different countries. It's obviously self-disclosure is a coordinated effort as well in those multi-jurisdictions, and so I think it comes down to evaluating the facts against the regulations in each one of the jurisdictions, and then charting out the best course of action based on prior experiences and based on the current administration and the current landscape and appetite for and guidance for potential settlements.
Snezana, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering if our listeners wanted any additional information on any of the topics we've talked about in this podcast, where could they go?
Our website, k2integrity.com, would be the best resource.
I hope our listeners will join us for our next episode, which we will cover global trends impacting risk and compliance in 2021 and perhaps beyond. Snezana, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this episode in our 5-part podcast series on integrity matters, assessing the corporate compliance climate in 2021, sponsored by K2 Integrity. For more information, you can check out the K2 Integrity website at www.k2integrity.com. I hope you'll join us again for another episode as we continue to explore many of the issues that corporate compliance professionals, practitioners, and corporate compliance functions will face in 2021 and beyond. This podcast series has been a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network.